Hi! I'm Sylvia from Vintage Kitchen Vixen, where I share tips for simple living, creating memorable gatherings, and preparing wholesome and traditional recipes with a vintage twist. And today I am going to talk to you about victory gardens. Victory gardens. Digging for victory. Have you heard of either of these terms before, or that expression? I'm sure if you're a history buff, you are familiar with victory gardens, or you've at least heard of the term. I'm going to talk about them a little bit briefly today, and then also explain why we should all have a victory garden today. There was a lot of propaganda around victory gardens during World War II. Both in the US and Canada and the UK, and I can't speak to any of the other countries, probably Australia because they were part of the Commonwealth, but I know these three countries for sure. There was a lot of propaganda around digging for victory, around victory gardens. So there were a lot of posters, there was educational footage, and there was also a lot of education because during World War II there was heavy rationing. There wasn't enough resources for everybody. There wasn't enough food for everybody. And so food was heavily rationed. Women were working, men were at war. There wasn't enough time for women to cook, but at the same time, they also needed to be able to supplement those rations. And so victory gardens were strongly encouraged to not only bolster those rations, because, if you didn't need to go wait in line for an hour or two for eggplant, tomatoes. Why would you do that if you could just dig it out of your garden? You were saving time, even though you had to put time into tending to your garden and to planting and maintaining and harvesting, and not just all of that, but also preserving. So if you had your garden during the summer and you grew, you also had to preserve everything. One of the arguments that we have today is that we just don't have enough time to garden, but look at all this time that we're spending watching television, and I guess that's the first example that comes to mind. Sitting in front of Netflix or watching the 6 o'clock news, or just skimming social media, or spending time on your phone looking down. Being sedentary, playing video games. We have time, and yes, we're working, but so did people during the Second World War. So victory gardens not only bolstered provisions, they were also shared with the community if there was an abundance. Not only was there a focus on growing, but there was a focus on growing a garden wherever you could. So if you were living in an apartment, having a balcony garden, or even growing something on your windowsill, if you were able to grow herbs or a tomato plant, you did it. So rooftop gardens, even the White House, the front lawn was a garden. At least that's what I've read. I need to take a look at that again. But I think it's the same thing at Buckingham Palace. Now, you might be wondering why I'm saying that this is applicable today. Why should we have victory gardens? Why should we bring them back? Okay, so first off, there's what's going on with our food supply. Unless you're supporting your local farmers, you're going to the farmers market every week to get the freshest produce available. Unless you have that available, or unless you have that spend available to, because usually this organic produce, this beautiful, gorgeous produce, unless you have the means to be able to afford a $5 bunch of radishes, you're probably going to the grocery store to get all of your produce. Organic produce, it's not cheap. And also, it doesn't really look appealing when it's in the grocery store because, I know for me, I don't always shop organic, and I know I should, especially with all those dirty vegetables that I think it's called the dirty dozen, so like celery's on that list. these crops, not only are they sprayed with pesticides and just, there's also the health of the soil that you got to keep in mind. There is, usually these crops are harvested early, so they're not harvested at peak freshness. Bananas, they're harvested, I mean, we're not going to be growing bananas unless you're in the right climate, but bananas, they are harvested when they're still green. So I probably have no idea what an actual banana is supposed to taste, because they've always been harvested when they're green. But for an example, pears, I often buy pears when they're still green, and there's nothing better than plucking a perfectly ripe pear off the branch and biting into that juicy goodness. And it's the same thing with peaches. They're harvested too early, they're shipped, because it's a lot more economical to ship something that's green, and that's not going to bruise as easily. So these things are shipped and around the country while they're still unripe, and then sometimes gases are introduced to start ripening them, or they're coated in wax to help keep them preserved longer. So I find that happens a lot with apples and with tomatoes. It just feels so waxy and disgusting, and everything, like you're eating all of that. So you can wash your produce, but how much of it are you actually getting off? And I always wash my produce. And then, I mean, I feel like every couple of months I go into the grocery store and there's yet another E. coli or a salmonella scare, and all of the romaine lettuce is taken off the shelves. So there's also that you need to take into consideration. So there's also GMOs. A lot of the fruits and vegetables that we're so used to, they've been so genetically modified that we can't even tell the difference anymore. Like, apples are supposed to be small. They're not supposed to all be large and uniform and look the same. I mean, Honeycrisp apples, for example, I love them. It's my favorite apple, but I know there's no way that Honeycrisp would exist without human intervention. And there's the monocrops, which is terrible for the soil. The way a lot of these giant farms are being operated, it's not sustainable, and it's not good for us. It's not good for the soil, and it's trickling back to us. Also, another thing to keep in consideration, we can't, like many of us already can't afford to go to the farmer's market, but food costs are rising, and they're going to keep rising this year and year after year. So prices are rising, wages aren't going up fast enough to be able to offset that. So for example, not that long ago, I came across an English cucumber for $3. $3 for a cucumber. And in the summer, I mean, they're so abundant. And it makes no sense to me, because now you have greenhouses, so this produce can be grown all year round, and for some reason, prices are still through the roof, and I don't understand it. Maybe it's the price of gas, the price of transportation. I don't know what it is, but you know, these prices aren't going to go down anytime soon. I mean, it's not so hard if you're able to buy everything on sale, which is what I strive to do. If you eat everything in season, again, what I try to do. But it's heck of a lot easier if you grow these own things yourself and you're able to preserve, like our grandmothers did. Another argument for bringing back the Victory Garden is that, as evidenced by all of the stuff that's happening to our food supply, we've lost touch with our food. Like, there are kids who have no idea where beef comes from. And I mean, now every time I go into the grocery store, there are these Frankenstein meat burgers, plant-based meat burgers, that cost $7 for 2 patties. I think you might know what I'm talking about. Those things don't belong there. They're disgusting. They should not be there. Oh my gosh, it's my bias. But I mean, we've lost touch with our food. If we're putting that into our meat section, no. We are very confused and very lost. There's so many kids, they have no idea where their food comes from. And I think the same can be said for a fair number of adults as well. So in addition to the fresh food supply, there is also those preserved foods that usually take up the middle aisle. So I'm not talking about anything that's boxed, I'm talking about the things that are canned. So my grandma, she used to can everything. My mom used to can everything. Everything used to be canned at home. Your tomatoes, you made tomato sauces, or you stewed your tomatoes and you had your tomato sauce. But now you have to get tomatoes that are full of salt, they're full of citric acid, and they're already Some of them already have spices that are ready and waiting to go. And if you want to get something without salt, that you just want pure tomatoes, you're paying, at least in Canada, you're paying a couple bucks for a can of tomatoes. And that's silly considering how many tomatoes a plant can yield in the summer months. I guess what I'm saying is that it's important for us to return to self-sufficiency, to go out and exercise, to get that fresh air, to get that sunshine, to get back in touch with our food, to reclaim a skill that we have lost, that we have abandoned, that we traded for I don't know what. And we can't use time as an excuse, because during World War II, people didn't have time either. Women were working heavy hours, a lot of hours, and the men weren't at home. So gardening became a family inclusive activity. The family, everybody got together. They planned the garden together, they planted together, they took care of the garden together, and they harvested and preserved together. So there was a sense of community. And there were also community gardens. So if you don't have space to have a garden, like for the last decade, I didn't have room for a garden. And now I do have a little plot, but it's something that I want to expand. So much time and energy is put into keeping up a pretty front lawn. Pesticides are sprayed on front lawns. There are often signs saying, hey, like, don't touch this lawn because it's just been sprayed, because everybody wants this perfect lawn. No dandelions in sight, no weeds. And usually that is a sign, if you don't see weeds, that's a sign of a pretty unhealthy lawn. So many people sink time and effort and energy into these picture perfect front lawns that don't produce anything. Yes, they're pretty, flowers are pretty, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't have cut flower gardens. Heck, I want to have a cut flower garden. I love bringing in flowers. But we have so much land. Like, why aren't we making it work for us? Why aren't we growing our own food? Why aren't we being self-sufficient? Why are we continually voting with our dollars saying, yes, please continue doing this to our food supply? Let's take it back. Let's empower ourselves to be able to do these things for ourselves. And if you don't have space for a garden, if you live in a condo, try to advocate for a rooftop garden, or start one up on your balcony, or start with a little windowsill planter, or join a community garden. There are community gardens all over the place. When I lived in Montreal, depending in what neighborhood you were, a lot of these sidewalks, they're tree lined, and people, they will plant gardens around these massive trees, just little gardens, and they grow things. Or they'll put a potato sack outside that has soil, and they'll grow everywhere. There's growth. Like, they know how to maximize their space. And I'm sure there are other cities like that too, where people grow wherever they possibly can. Granted, in the beginning, gardening, it takes time, it takes money when you first getting started, and at the very beginning, you're probably going to suck at it. Last year was my first year having my own vegetable garden, and I was rubbish at it. I mean, I was very good at weeding, but I did all kinds of things wrong, and I didn't have the biggest yield. I didn't have the yield that I was expecting, that's for sure. But it was a huge learning experience, and I know that next year I'm going to do much better. There were a lot of hard lessons that I learned, and I'm going to be able to apply them. And I did invest a fair bit last year. Actually, it wasn't too bad. I know I would spend a lot more money if I bought $3 cucumbers. In the end, the return on investment is really high, because can you really put a price on your health? Can you put a price on being more self-sufficient? Can you put a price on that fresh air that you're getting, on that exercise that you're getting, on that time that's spent not sitting on your couch watching television, on that time that you're spending with your family, learning a new skill together, learning how to garden, learning how to preserve your own food? I think there is so much that we have to learn, and I think we need to dig for victory again, just on our own terms, just in a different way. We're not at war anymore, but maybe we are, and we're just fighting a different war, the war on food, or the war on our food supply. So I'm digging for victory, and I hope you will dig for victory too. Anyhow, that's my 2 cents on victory gardens. I'd love to hear your thoughts on, where our food supply is, on whether or not you think we should start gardening. I know I Personally, I'd like to dedicate more space in my backyard to maintaining a garden rather than mowing the lawn, because I don't like mowing the lawn. My husband doesn't like mowing the lawn, but I like gardening. Actually, I don't mind mowing the lawn, but still, like, I'd much rather be able to produce food and to get cucumbers as opposed to nothing, because lawn doesn't give me anything. I do get violets, and I do love the violets, but there's just some areas on my lawn, like, I don't need it. Like, I'd rather have lettuce. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on Victory Gardens, whether it's past or whether it's something you want to start doing yourself. Like, do you garden? Do you want to start gardening? How do you get your food? How do you find it? I'd love to hear your comments, so leave a comment below. Other than that, if you are new to the kitchen, I really hope you enjoyed this first episode of Vintage Kitchen Vixen. I'm just really sorry that your first episode did not involve any silent film mode. You'll have to check one of my recipe videos like this one here. The link to that one will be below for you. I hope you will subscribe and hit that bell notification so that you never miss an episode of the kitchen. And if you are coming back to the kitchen, thank you so much for joining me yet again for an episode of Vintage Kitchen Vixen. I'm always so happy for you to join me. If you like this video and you want to show your support, you can hit the thumbs up, you can leave a comment below, and you can also share this video on social media. Maybe you can get everybody else's thoughts on Victory Gardens in the modern or present day. But other than that, I put out 2 new videos a week, so I will be seeing you real soon. Bye! This lack of time as an excuse. Did I get everything? Propaganda, filling larders, pesticides, food costs, last touch.